Dear friends and colleagues, welcome to this Governors Seminar on cross-border collaboration to build future resilience. We're gathered here at a time when, as we all know, international trade and investment is facing considerable headwinds, isn't it? So we're going to discuss today efforts to strengthen cross-border ties, collaboration, cooperation, and how can that then deliver the prize that we're after, which is greater resilience in the face of global shocks. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to our eminent governors and panelists. You will have an opportunity to put questions to them yourselves. So let me ask you to make sure you have your devices at the ready and connect with Pigeonhole Live. You can either use the details are up on the screen above me. You can either use the QR code or use your web browser and go to pigeonhole.at, and the code is Milan 2025. We will put this slide up every now and again in case you don't get it right now. Okay, so shall we get started? Please make sure you join the conversation. We want to hear from you too. I'd like to get going, if I may, with our hosts, Italy. And we're delighted that we're joined by the alternate governor for Italy, Ms. Francesca Utili. You may not know, but she has extensive experience in the area of economics and finance around developing countries. And she is currently director at the Treasury of the Ministry of Economic and Finance. So I would like to ask you, Ms. Utili, the global economy is facing considerable uncertainties, as we know, possible paralysis and fragmentation we keep hearing about. Now, Italy recently held the presidency of the G20 and the G7, which put you very much at the heart of the international economic order. How concerned are you about the threats that the global economic order currently faces?
Good afternoon, everybody, and let me start by thanking not only you for your question, but all the audience for being here today and for the honor of kickstarting this prestigious panel. And I must say that having been here for a few days already, it is really clear that the concerns for the unprecedented disruption of global trade that could affect the global economy have been at the center of any debate. And indeed, we are witnessing a major shift in the global economic landscape that could have very severe implications for financial markets, trade, inequality, and where the most vulnerable really risk being strongly affected. But I think that an equally powerful message has emerged these days on the fact that multilateral cooperation and multilateral institutions are more important than ever. Precisely this time in history and facing such uncertainties and challenges, they can help us preserve an open dialogue, contribute to keeping stability and shared rules on which global prosperity is based. So indeed, I also believe that the measures taken and announced by the US administration have already triggered some sort of a review or a rethink of globalization, while the gains in terms of global prosperity of international economic cooperation or integration are clear and they're not put into question. But there are additional calls for rebalancing through domestic reforms, more voices highlighting that the gains of globalization have not been evenly distributed across and within countries, and the trade should not only be free, but also fair and really based on a level playing field, and so on. So a parallel process is also ongoing in the search of diversification of trade flows and the potential of new partnership. So in such a situation of extreme uncertainty, where it's really not clear on the one hand where negotiations will be heading, but also where those additional dynamics will head us that have been already triggered, where will they bring us? And multilateral institutions like the ADB and in general multilateral cooperation are key factors to tackle those challenges, to help us focusing on the benefits of coordination to achieve common interests and reduce uncertainties. And this enhanced collaboration would support higher and sustainable long-term economic growth, averting downside risk and mitigating their possible consequences. From the experience that we had from the G20 and G7 perspective, I could mention several initiatives of provision of global public goods that are extremely helpful, especially at this time. Let me just mention finance health, coordinated work at the G20, the Sustainable Finance Working Group, a roadmap of activities that involve involve the private sector on sustainable finance that help us have climate funds more effective with leverage of resources, also through the interaction with MDBs. And last but not least, of course, the Capital Adequacy Framework Review, which not only helped us leverage on existing resources, but which has triggered a process of involving so many stakeholders, shareholders, credit rating agencies, international investors, that has then been built upon by subsequent presidencies of Indonesia, of India, and now we have a roadmap for better, more effective and bigger MDBs, which is bringing a lot of transformation. So those are really very concrete examples of the value of multilateral cooperation to act together to tackle uncertainties.
It's a very robust response there then from our alternate governor for Italy, Francesca Utili. I'd now like to introduce you to our governor for India, the Honorable Nirmala Sitharaman, who's also the very eminent finance minister and renowned finance minister of India. So, Mr. Sitharaman, India has been building up its high value-add manufacturing sector, especially since the pandemic, with the diversification of supply chains becoming a priority. Are you concerned that this might now be in jeopardy, or do you see it as possibly even an opportunity for India?
Well, thank you for having me here, first of all. This question of supply chains, India's approach has not been a short-term, immediate-term concern or immediate-term resolution of the problem. We've taken a long-term approach towards supply chains, keeping in mind our strategic strengths and making sure that India's capacities are leveraged. And therefore, the approach itself is not for the immediate tactical response. It's more to strengthen ourselves on the basis of the assets that we have, whether it is in the form of human capital, the skilled manpower, or technology in which we have a lead, if I can say that way, and also sectors in which we think we can build further. So one, the approach itself is not for short term, we are there in the long term for it. Second, we are also looking at sectors in which our population is engaged in. And just for the records, we have about 600 million people who are less than 25 years of age. So we are not dealing with an economy which is aging. Yes, we have a population which is aging, but our productive age manpower number is also substantial, as much as it can be impacting our per capita income, for instance, on the basis of which we are constantly questioned. You may be the fourth largest economy, but you're per capita. We have to look at it both ways. Yes, the per capita is influenced by the number, meaning your denominator, which is a huge number. But at the same time, this is the productive population which is going to give us the advantage if, for instance, the way in which we've developed digital public infrastructure, using technology to make sure that access to global market is given to even the lowest rung of citizen who's somewhere in the far-flung area in a village with some handicraft products that he wants to market, and so on. So, looking at levers which we want to fully use, whether it is technology, whether it is manpower, whether it is skilling the manpower, the government's policies have been tailored in such a way that we are able to support manufacturing, support service sector in which India has a lead. If I may just give you for data's sake, India's GDP has 60% of its contribution coming from the service sector. So the manufacturing sector's contribution will have to steadily increase from, let us say, 12 to 13% to 16% to 18%, and then touching. Even on that, because of the policies that we have created to help in some 14 sectors which are priority sectors, sunrise sectors as we would call them, whether it is electronics, whether it is semiconductors, whether it is pharmaceuticals, whether it is looking at advanced chemistry, and so on. So when in the 14 sectors, any additional manufacturing capacity which comes, we give them a production-linked incentive.
Right.
As a result, today, the supply chain matter for me is not the disruption which I will face today, but it is the sustainable supply chain link which India wants to build with the global supply chain using the assets that we have. Assets meaning the soft assets, whether it is our manpower, the technology lead that which we have given our citizens, and above all, making sure identified sectors are there for us to build and take India's supply chain issues forward.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sitharaman. Very clear exposition there of India's long-term approach to building up supply chains by investing in its strengths so that it can take advantage of global supply chain demand. I'd like to introduce you to the governor from Fiji now, the Honorable Mr. Biman Prasad. He's Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji as well as being Finance Minister. Welcome, Mr. Prasad. Now, we all know that tourism is Fiji's big strength, but maybe not everyone here knows that the US is the biggest export market for Fiji water. So I was thinking to myself, how would Fiji be affected by a trade war, for instance, and other economies in the Pacific, for instance, when they're in the midst of trying to diversify the base of their economies?
So thank you, Nisha, and it's such an honor and pleasure to be part of this panel. So the first point I would like to make before I speak about Fiji itself, that perhaps, after a long while, this is probably one of the most uncertain global economic environment that we have now experienced or that we are going to see for the next foreseeable months or years. And whenever you have that kind of global uncertainty, the expectation of what happens in the future determines what happens now. I think for small island economies like Fiji, that is a big concern. Specifically with respect to US tariff, 20% of our exports go to the United States. The weighted average tariff on US goods is just 1.8%. 72% of the imports from the US attract zero duty. 25% probably have less than 5%, and only 3% will have higher tariffs. In the short to medium term, we don't expect the impact of 32% duty on the export, particularly of our Fiji water, but other products such as kava, turmeric, more primary sector products, where the demand may be a bit inelastic, and so we don't expect a direct, immediate hit on our exports. However, what we are more concerned with, as you pointed out quite correctly, 40% of our GDP comes from tourism and the services sector. And we experienced this when we had the global financial crisis. The good growth or the strong economies of Australia and New Zealand cushioned us because we didn't suffer so much. But if the tariff war escalates into a global economic slowdown, and you see the impact on disposable incomes of our source destinations of household disposable income going down in those countries such as US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, our main sources for tourists, then we could see a significant impact on our economy, because while tourism remains a very strong component of our economy, 60% of the rest of the economy comes from the export of some of our primary sectors. And we are focusing on diversifying our economy away from tourism. And we feel that, and most of the Pacific Island countries are in the same boat. So the global economic uncertainty, and we don't know right now how the trade diversion that is going to take place, how that will translate into various transmission mechanisms of trade remittances, whether that is going to have a drastic impact on our economies, and our ability then to be able to shift resources to other sectors to diversify and keep our economies resilient and sustainable.
That's a very, very important point that we just heard from Mr. Prasad. The second-order demand effects from a trade war are what we should be holding really in front of us and focusing on, because that's probably an even bigger threat, not just to economies like Fiji, but generally, because if I recall after the financial crisis, it wasn't the financial crisis per se that triggered the demand collapse. It was the uncertainties that followed that made people very reluctant to spend money. So we should be very careful about that, and thank you very much for raising that as a point for all of us to consider, Mr. Prasad. Let me introduce you now to our Governor for Finland, who's sitting over here very quietly waiting to join in the conversation. This is Mr. Pasi Helman. He's the Undersecretary of State for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Finland. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Finnish economy has just been emerging from recession and was hoping for a better year in 2025. It's been weak recently, partly due to proximity to Russia's war in Ukraine. So could I ask you, Mr. Helman, to what extent has geopolitical uncertainty been affecting the Finnish economy and its outlook?
Well, thank you for that question, and it's an honor to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. It's very correct to say that international events have really impacted the Finnish economy in a negative manner, which has meant that we have faced fiscal constraints, which has then led to reduced possibilities also for international financial collaboration, and much of it has been caused, as you say, by Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, but of course also other, let's say, uncertainties, unpredictabilities in the global economy, in the global context, have made it very, very difficult to really improve the economic situation. Actually, it's not only the consequences on the economy which have been severe. I think we're equally concerned about the consequences on the rules-based international order. And I think we have maybe drawn at least two different types of conclusions from all this. And one is the importance of multilateral system, the importance of multilateral bodies like the Asian Development Bank, and actually the importance to be able to produce positive news, positive achievements while we are getting so much negative news around the world these days. So we need to focus also on what's positive, what can be achieved together, and that's why the international collaboration is important. The second conclusion that we are making is really the importance of resilience of the society. And this goes very much to the country level, the social and economic resilience. And the interesting thing is that this is, of course, equally relevant to developed and developing countries. So I think, again, that emphasizes the need for international collaboration, and there's a very clear link, of course, to what the ADB is trying to do in the Asia and the Pacific region.
Indeed, thank you very much, Mr. Helman. That brings me very nicely on to what I was going to ask President Kantha. We're here, after all, to discuss building future resilience and where the cross-border collaboration will help us to get there. So circling back to the main point of our discussion, President Kanda, how do you see the current geopolitical environment impacting Asia-Pacific's ability to resist future shocks and create future resilience? Tell us what you see is at stake here.
Yeah, thank you, Nisha-san. This is the most important and relevant question at this point in time, and I really appreciate my colleagues' excellent observation. And I can't agree more. From my perspective, of course, they're full of uncertainty, probably unprecedented after the 1944, the Bretton Woods or 1945 United Nations. So it is not so easy situation. Particularly, the trade conflict or the supply chain disruption and the geopolitical tension escalation are obviously not good for global demand. And particularly, the Asian economies may relatively more hit because this region has been benefited from the open economy to be to become the middle income status. And indeed, for instance, their April 2nd announcement from the White House showed if it would be implemented 30% increase in tariff on average to the Asian countries, and also the 5 of the 10 the highest tariff increase would be 5 of 10 is in the region of ours. So it's not so easy. But in addition, probably I'm even more concerned about the spillover to the financial and capital market, as you mentioned, suggested. Because investors don't like any the very much uncertain situation, and so it would drive their risk aversion and dampen the investor confidence in the market. So, looking back to the Asian financial crisis, we witnessed their huge capital outflow as well as their the debt explosion. But now, Asia is much stronger, robust, because of the sound macroeconomic policies, equipped with their much stronger the foreign reserves, a much deeper financial market, and much closer economic integration in the region. And last year we enjoyed the 5% increase in Asia and the Pacific. So of course I'm very much concerned, but I'm rather cautiously not optimistic but positive, because we can take this opportunity of challenges. These challenges into the opportunities to improve. So we've got to, and we can strengthen our domestic demand, and we can diversify our industry and trade partners more, and we can increase the regional connectivity in the region. And as far as the trade is concerned, probably we can deepen our trade agreement in the region, including the service sector, and also trying to find the broader trade partners, of course, including here in Europe. Thank you.
Very interesting response there, President Kanda. So while not minimizing the seriousness of the potential threats ahead, we must not forget that there are tools. We have been in these situations before, and we must double down on the tools that we know will work so that we can get through it better. Thank you very much for that inspiration. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that I have so far only received 3 questions on Pigeonhole Live, so please send them in. I'm going to ask a few more questions to our panelists, and then it's over to whatever comes in on my iPad, okay? So please send in your questions. So let's talk a little bit more about what cross-border collaboration can actually deliver. It's a wonderful word, wonderful theme, but what does it mean in practice? And I wonder if I could ask you, Mr. Prasad, for your point of view, from a Pacific Island nation, where do you see the greatest potential for Pacific economies to develop deeper ties within the Pacific economies themselves, the Pacific Islands, or within the Asia-Pacific region, or maybe even further afield with Europe or elsewhere? Well, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think that's a very important and perhaps a critical question. And if you look at the context of the current global uncertainty and uncertainties of the past, I think as part of the Pacific region, and I personally have been a very strong advocate of much more deeper, meaningful regional integration. And by that, we mean amongst the Pacific Island countries, the 14 members of the Pacific Islands Forum, but also with our two developed closest neighbors who are also part of the Pacific, Australia and New Zealand. And we are strongly advocating a much more deeper, meaningful regional integration. And by that, we mean visa-free travel. We mean harmonization of laws, policies, regulations, so that there is cross-border movement of not only trade, but people, ideas, policies, laws. And many of the Pacific Island countries are very small economies. There are good gains to be made from looking at the region together in terms of regional public goods. For example, we have a University of the South Pacific, because you look at countries within the Pacific who would not be able to afford and run a good university. But over the last 50 years, that university has produced graduates for all the 14 countries. So that's a very good example of a deeper regional integration. Beyond that, the Pacific as a group is looking at partnership with our developed partners, larger economies. So we have, as far as Fiji is concerned, we have very close relationship with our traditional democratic partners, including India and many others, where we feel that there are a lot of possibilities, not only in terms of market for our products, but also in terms of getting ideas, technology, experiences that would help Fiji and other Pacific Island countries to diversify, build resilience. As part of the integration strategy and the impact of climate change on Pacific Island countries, and we are saying to everyone, look, this is not about the future. This is about our lived reality now. And again, as part of the integration strategy, we feel that that will allow us as a region to advocate for better international financial architecture, timely, scaled-up finances for adaptation and building resilience of our community. So integration holistically can aid to that kind of sustainability and resilience of our economies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad. Now, Mrs. Sitaraman, something's been intriguing me that I would like to put to you. Just a few months ago, there was a huge EU delegation that visited India, led by President Ursula von der Leyen, and practically all her commissioners, I think, were there with her. And what came out from the visit was a new roadmap was declared with the prospect of an EU-India free trade agreement by the end of 2025. Now, that's not an easy thing to deliver. There have been stop-start talks going on for a while. How much of a priority do you think it is for India to achieve an FTA with the EU?
A very high priority. Somewhat deriving from the governor from Fiji, the global fragmentation, and also the way in which the tariff April 2nd has panned out. Uncertainties are increasing, no doubt. And also, simultaneously, you find global institutions not carrying the heft that they carried earlier. And if that is the situation, countries are today very clearly looking at bilateral arrangements, some of which, in the case of UK or in the case of EU, India has been negotiating for some time, quite some time. But today the sense of urgency is felt by both the sides. Also because I think market cannot be one big market which you've been accessing. Supply chains cannot be from one big market from where you get it. The concentration risks have played out substantially. Disruptions have played out substantially. So whether you look at it from the point of view of one plus many, you need to have investments done in various different countries. You need to have market access in different countries. You also need to have bilateral arrangements given the current prevailing situation. So in that, India has been successfully negotiating bilateral treaties with very many countries. The EFTA is one which we concluded, with UAE we concluded, with Australia we had concluded, and so on. So the EU is top of our priority, also because of the traditional links that we've had with EU, just as traditional links we've had with UK. And if I can, I'm not revealing the negotiations, but if I can say, it is in the public domain that except for one or two items on which each side is fixated, there's largely an agreement that we can get the agreement through. So if the negotiations go forward with that spirit, this December thing that you said, by the year end that you said, is not impossible to achieve.
Excellent to hear.
We'll hope that we'll get it done.
It's a top priority, except for one or two items which people are fixated on. They're almost there. So now we just need leadership at the highest levels to get them across the line. That's what I'm taking away. Very nice to hear that from you, Mrs. Sitaraman.
Thank you.
Governor Hellman, how do you see the scope for closer ties between Finland and developing Asia? Mutual beneficial cooperation?
Definitely so. I think the collaboration agenda between Finland and the countries in the Asia and the Pacific is a very potentially a very large positive agenda. And I would expand to say that between Europe or European Union countries and the countries in the APAC region, it's a very positive and broad agenda. On trade, among Finland's top trading partners, there are now increasing number of countries from the Asia-Pacific region, from Southeast Asia, East Asia, South Asia, and some of their importance is increasing in relative terms. On regional integration and cooperation, I think there's a very good agenda for dialogue to sort of compare notes and also learn lessons from each other's experiences. For example, I think that there's been significant developments in intra-regional trade in Asia, but if you look at certain concrete numbers, I think, and you compare different continents, for example, in the intra-ASEAN trade, the share of intra-regional, intra-ASEAN trade is 22% of the exports of the ASEAN countries, whereas in most EU countries, EU exports are between 50 to 75%. So I think there's clearly an agenda to make progress.
Still a lot of scope.
There's a lot of scope for further collaboration. Then if you look at more specifically on the area of development finance, the EU's Global Gateway Initiative, which is promising investments worth 300 billion between 2024 and 2027. This is of course not only Asia continent, but other continents also. I think there's a lot of potential to also work with the ADB and to work in a new way, in a new intelligent catalytic way, so that you use public funds much more effectively to attract private funds in order to reach these investment targets. And Global Gateway is particularly focused on connectivity issues, both physical connectivity, but very importantly also digital connectivity. And particularly in the area of digital connectivity, there's much that the European side and particularly Finland actually can offer to Asia when it comes to issues like trusted connections, trusted connectivity. But then, of course, there are very many other sectors. Critical minerals is an interesting example where ADB is only starting to expand its capacity. I think we have a lot of experience and information that we can share and look for new cooperation possibilities. So the agenda is long, and I would like to say it's expanding also.
Thanks very much. So we've heard from both Mr. Hellman and from Mrs. Sitaraman about the importance of creating better economic ties between Europe and different countries in Asia or the whole region, depending on how you look at it. So let's take that question further and see what Francesca Utili, alternate governor from Italy, believes. Italy is one of ADB's founding members. Do you think there is a greater urgency now for Europe to strengthen its relationship with the Asia-Pacific countries, pave the way to closer economic ties?
Yes, thanks for this question. And I mean, in general, fostering a stronger relationship with Asia is crucial not only for addressing the current situation, the current trade challenges, but also in general to seize the opportunity for joint action, shaping together a future of sustainable and inclusive growth. And partnership can really make the different regions working together to address critical global issues like, for example, climate change or digital transformation, and also the increasing interaction between the two that, as I think, emerged very clearly from the plenary discussion of governors this morning, since the digital transformation is bringing requests for having standards, for having effective ways to addressing potential additional divides. So for the need of specific reskilling, of targeting specific areas of the population, but it also brings a very strong challenge in terms of the energy consumption, so that then in the end, the relationship with measures to address climate change must be really seen in a holistic manner. So this is just an example. But really, I believe that EU and Asia share a common interest in fostering resilient value chains in such sectors like technology, automotive, green energy, and that could really create long-term economic benefits for everybody. But I mean, if I may, let me also add the fact that international gatherings such as this annual meeting of the Asian Development Bank can really serve this fundamental purpose of strengthening these ties and collaboration, going much further beyond the statutory duties of attending the statutory meetings, and really, within the honor of hosting these meetings in Italy, the effort of being part of the organization of these events really shed a strong light, and I was really impressed on the richness also of the side events and the range and variety of shareholders involved that participate to the meeting with high expectations of going forward and going back with additional ideas of partnership. And Italy really has a very close and long-standing relationship with the Asia-Pacific region and with the ADB. That is thanks to what the authorities at the time, which was 1966, they had already these forward-looking visions that we are now still discussing in order to further enhance, so that Italy was one of the first block of, I think, around 30 partners that were joining the bank at the time.
Thank you, Ms. Udili. President Kanda, we've already seen considerable economic integration across Asia-Pacific. Mr. Hellman just mentioned that himself, even though it has a lot more scope to go. But how important do you think it is to deepen those ties at this moment? And what is the ADB's role in promoting that? What can ADB actually do to help deepen the ties?
Thank you very much, Nisha, for asking this, because regional cooperation and integration is one of the top strategic priorities of ADB. And this is very much important, particularly in this situation. We need to make the region more resilient against the external shocks. And we believe the regional cooperation is very much, strong instrument and ammunition to do this. And the ADB can do in a variety of ways. Let me make some example. One is direct assistance to regional initiatives like ASEAN Power Grid, and the ADB is readily committing the $10 billion for the regional interconnectivity of power. And also, digital and tourism, we have a number of the cooperation projects with ASEAN and others. And another thing is we are trying to decrease the trade barriers by streamlining of the various problem. For instance, the inefficiency of customs or the need for the harmonized standards. These things we are very much working hard. And thirdly, we are sort of the secretariat for the sub-regional initiatives like in the West Asia, South Asia, and the Greater Mekong sub-region. As far as the finance is concerned, we have a very strong program called the Trade and Supply Chain Initiative, and which comprises lending and guaranteeing, particularly for the trade of SMEs. Yep. And last year, we dispersed and guaranteed the 4.9 billion, but my ambition is to increase up to 6.2 billion by 2030. And of course, our commitment to increase the private sector development by 4 times to 13 billion annual commitment is, of course, one of the most important elements to enhance the regional cooperation through the private sector initiatives. So there are many things, and one thing I'd like to mention is this economic cooperation is really special for us. As you may be aware, our charter stipulates that economic growth and economic cooperation are really our objectives. So from the start of the institution, we are completely, positioned to enhance regional cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Kanda, and thank you to all of you for sending in so many questions. I need not have worried. So, dear governors, I'm going to let you decide whether you want to answer a question or not. I'm just going to put them to you, and raise your hand if you'd like to go on. This is a question which is dear to my heart, so I'm going to start with it. Globalization has raised living standards for so many millions of people in Asia, but still there are many, many millions who suffer considerable poverty and hardship. So how does a vision of future resilience meet their needs? What is the connection between what we're talking about and the needs of the really poor, is what the question is about. Who would like to respond to that question first? Oh, President Kanda.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we have the, for instance, they made the 400,000 people out of poverty during the last ADF period, but still there are lots of the pockets of the poverty or absolute poverty, and the, more people are rather exposed to the new vulnerabilities coming from the changing climate, more typhoons and cyclones and the extreme heat and the droughts and floods. So there are many things, even more things, more complex challenges we are facing. So for these complex challenges, we need to employ the complex solutions. I mean, so we've got to deal with every aspect of challenges together with all stakeholders. So we need the infrastructure, we need the human capital investment in education and the vocational training and health, of course. And, particularly, climate action might be needed, and there are many things. So what we learned is, in a sense, in every sense, the integration of our efforts. So sovereign and non-sovereign, whole sectors and the partner should be not only the government, but the local government and the private sector and academia and the NGOs and of course the local people on the ground. And together, probably we can find a solution to address your question. Thank you.
I can see you feel strongly about it too, President Kanda. Mr. Prasad.
I think President Kanda touched on a very important point, and he talked about new vulnerabilities and the impact of climate change. If I can just make a quick point about the Pacific, that's a very, very important point. We are now at a point where we are saying it's not about the future impact of climate change and the severity and the frequency of natural disasters emanating from global climate change. We in the Pacific are facing, it's kind of a lived reality now. And what we are saying is that these new vulnerabilities require immediate, which means speed and scale and quantum of finance that would be needed to build resilience, to build infrastructure that is resilient, that is going to keep the economic activities going. And I think sometimes it is not well understood, or perhaps not understood in terms of the urgency that many of the Pacific Island countries need to address that particular vulnerability. And we fear that if we don't, then there are many more people who could easily fall into the poverty trap, and it would be harder to get them out because you need to have that scale of investment in building those infrastructure which gets, so the loss and damage that has already been experienced will be harder to deal with as we go into the future if we don't do it now.
Very nicely put. You've illustrated the connection between resilience and poverty and how to protect people from falling into poverty. Very nicely, Mr. Prasad. Thank you very much. You wanted to say something, Mr. Hellman?
Yes, thanks. I think on an overall level, the sort of a simple response to the question is that, of course, you need to ensure that whatever development you support, it has to be inclusive and equitable. And I think the ADB response to that is in the form of ADB Strategy 2030 and all that it covers. And equally, at the national level, similar policies are necessary. The other part of the equation is then, of course, what all sources can you sort of engage for development and to use as development finance. And we will be having a very large international summit on financing for development, fourth summit in Spain, end of June, early July this year. And that summit will look at all the possible sources that need to be enhanced and engaged for the benefit of development. And I would maybe mention two aspects there, and of course the official development assistance is and will continue to be important, particularly for the poorer countries, and really to ensure inclusive development there. But it's also actually possible that the overall ODA envelope in the future will be smaller than in the past, which really means that we need to use that money much more wisely, in a much more intelligent manner. As I was earlier referring to, we need to use the public funds that we have to enhance, leverage, mobilize, catalyze, whichever term you wish to use, so that we can tap into private flows as well. And the second aspect I want to mention is, and this is particularly relevant for Asia because many countries are becoming clearly more prosperous in the Asia-Pacific region, and it is then the importance of also putting all the possible domestic resources for the benefit of development, the so-called domestic resource mobilization agenda. And And I think one example how you can maybe compare how different regions or continents are approaching the issue is actually a finding from one recent OECD report, which was comparing the tax to GDP ratios in different countries and categories. And it was interesting that among the 36 countries in the Asia and the Pacific region, the tax to GDP ratio was 19%, whereas the OECD average was 34%. And for comparison, Latin America and the Caribbean region, the tax to GDP ratio was 21.5. So I think you shouldn't approach these kind of figures in a too simplistic manner, but you get some idea about the differences and what can be done.
The scope is in the upside, hopefully. Thank you very much, Mr. Hellman. There is a question here which is the most popular of all. So I'm going to see if I can tempt Mrs. Sitaraman and Ms. Utili to reflect on this question. And that is, alongside the challenges which we're currently facing in these very uncertain economic times, what are the opportunities that countries can find? What are the things that you think we should be focusing on where you feel optimistic about? Mrs. Sitaraman.
I think the best way, and which is not my suggestion, but the way in which many countries are dealing with this global uncertainty, is to measure up for themselves as to what are the strengths and challenges for their own countries. That is why from a multilateral world, today you've started having a bilateral mindset within countries. You look at the opportunities you have, the strengths you have. And then you also search for countries, whether belonging to a particular group or a different group, where your interests are complementary with their interests. And that is now largely prevalent in the global scenario. As a result, I think the specific answer to your question is, countries have realized that there should be at least some level of countries' own resources being used for meeting its demands, self-reliance. So it is not inward-looking a policy. It's not a policy which is inward-looking, it's progressive. To a large extent, countries realize today, and I think many in the global south and emerging markets realize today that self-reliance in core sectors is important. The free trade principle which made us post-globalization to see where efficiency prevails and therefore link it with your supply chains, and you found a very economically prudent solution. But today, that economic prudent solution has caused huge disruptions. And this hurts the common people. And therefore, I think there is no going back on globalization, but yet being cautious that your dependencies should be largely addressed through your own capabilities. And where you really cannot, you're obviously searching for a complementary partner who can. So it has actually led to a lot of review of countries and their own capabilities, essentially making sure that your security, whether it is your food security, whether it's your energy security, are all taken care of. I'll just elaborate on one little example for the idea that I'm putting forward. There are countries with huge spaces available, and there are with less space available, land space. And in this quest for self-reliance, or in this quest for renewable energy, countries have found it fit now to say, look, I need to have a lot more renewable energy mix in my basket to meet my energy requirement. Now, if I have to have that mix, I don't have enough space for renewable energy, and therefore can I make sure that I have a relationship, some kind of a cooperation with another country, where maybe I go and invest and get that renewable energy points for myself. And in the process, both the countries which are into this agreement benefit from the renewable energy that you generate. So no longer are you looking at conventional ways of doing things, but you're looking at out-of-the-box solutions, more for your own country's security, and therefore self-reliance in some grade, if not completely. I'm closing all my doors and windows, I'm going to look inward. No. That spread, which was a result of globalization, will have to now be tempered down.
Very interesting and subtle answer there, Mrs. Sitaraman. Thank you very much indeed. Ms. Otili, what opportunities do you think countries can find in a time like this?
Well, first of all, I think that this process that we see of looking also at the domestic reforms that could enhance productivity, that could enhance growth and job creation is a process that may receive an additional boost in this context, so this may bring some benefits in the end. But in general, there is a process ongoing of looking with fresh eyes at globalization dynamics and who the partners are and what are the strategic sectors that need to be really looked at. So I'm sure that this will bring opportunities for some. Whether this is going to be, in general, a positive process, I mean, I think it's hard to tell at this stage. But I think that one message really comes forward, and is that we really should look at how precious the multilateral conversation, the multilateral institution, and the multilateral instrument that we have at our disposal are, especially at this time in history. So, and that, I think, is really a legacy that we also have from the discussion that we've been having during those meetings. So that, I mean, look, going to that, I think that really the spirit that Italy had in hosting the meeting was really based on the willingness to create a new dynamic of having stronger partnerships with the bank and with the Asia-Pacific regions, not only involving institutional partners, but also involving the business community. And I see that the attendance that we had here, the interest, the participation to all the seminars, it's part of this, on the one hand, awareness of the need to do more, to reform, to look at other opportunities, and on the other hand, on the fact that knowing that this area is really an area that could be extremely promising for the opportunities.
Thank you, Ms. Oh, President Kanda.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, I believe in the great, huge potential of science and technology. Of course, there are many demerits or risks associated with the diffusion and development of the technologies. For instance, there are a lot of discussion about the AI, the replacement of the human labor, and also the loss of the control of humanity. But at the same time, we see a lot of huge merits. For instance, the financial inclusion. The digital technology has provided the great opportunity to connect with the financial opportunities. So there are many things still we can tap on the technologies, particularly to provide the chance for the most vulnerable people to leapfrog to the cutting-edge services of the society. Yeah. So I'm quite positive about it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Another popular question here is about the role of the private sector. We're here to talk about cross-border collaboration, right? And the question is, what role can the private sector play for greater cross-border collaboration? I wonder who would like to take, Mr. Prasad, would you like to take that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's a very important, relevant question as well. And obviously, the role of private sector investment, private sector development in the overall growth of any economy is well understood, well articulated, I think, over so many years. I think it's becoming harder to create those policies, cross-border policies, to facilitate investment, particularly in the area of renewable energy, in the area of infrastructure. More difficult ones, for example, is a private sector role in healthcare, in education. Although the opportunities in those sectors are huge, and for many countries, the amount of resources or amount of investment that is needed to lift people out of health, education, poverty, can only be done through private sector investment, public-private partnership models. But it doesn't always work in the way that produces outcomes that are affordable, that is leading to effective delivery of those services. So again, you know, the role of private sector, not only in terms of just economic sectors, but also in social sectors is very, very important. And I think that cross-border collaboration, deeper, more meaningful regional integration, and beyond would bring about opportunities for further investment from the private sector in those countries.
Thanks, Mr. Prasad, for getting us going. Mr. Hellman?
The role of the private sector is of course, very crucial for sustainable development. If we look at jobs creation, I think in any sort of a progressive, sustainably developing economy, by far the greatest majority of new jobs will be created by the private sector. So I think that's one reason why we very much support the ambitious plan that President Kanda indicated in his speech yesterday morning about the level of private sector operations to be reached by ADB by 2030. In addition, also the private sector operations supported by the bank, I think will need to be looked at in a very new and innovative way to make sure that you know, we don't only stick to what we know, and what we have been doing before. And I would like to mention one good and very interesting example that we as Finland also have been supporting with financial support on 2 different occasions, an initiative by ADB called ADB Ventures, which is basically almost like a venture capital type of operation run by ADB, I think first of its kind ever for ADB, and targeting startup, innovative solutions, sustainable solutions. And I think the experience so far has been quite successful, quite positive, and I think we need to take lessons learned from that type of operations and then be serious about scaling up and replicating those.
Okay, so watch that space. Thank you very much. Francesca Utili.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that within this setting, it's of course a very relevant conversation, since while we see that official development assistance is somehow being affected by several decisions over other emergencies. At the same time, I think that the reflection on how to better involve the private sector within the activities of, and together with multilateral development banks to a range of instruments is much more advanced. I think we have witnessed to several seminars where the role that blended finance can play, the role that guarantees can play, and also the reflection on potential innovative instruments in order to achieve a better leverage of scarcer and scarcer public resources have really led to very important conversation vis-a-vis the huge needs of financing, for example, the green transition and the digital transformation. And just I wanted to mention one example that relates with the topic of disaster risk, the need of finance, the need to tackle the insurance gaps. And during our G7 presidency, we have developed a framework of public-private partnerships, a set of guidelines on how to better build those partnerships so that you can effectively engage the private sector in order for it to participate to these huge insurance need that is related to disaster risk, and we have then extended the analysis together with the World Bank in order to find targeted specific solutions for emerging and developing economies. That's a topic that's also so relevant for the activity also of the ADB.
Please, President Kanda.
Thank you very much. Again, very briefly, PSD is very much important for job creation and innovation. And what we can do, one is helping the policy reform for the deregulation, liberalization. And the second thing is deepening capital market with a sound corporate governance. Third, bring in the innovation, financing innovation, including PPP and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a very popular question here, which I would dearly like to put to Mrs. Sitaraman, because I have heard her answer this question before, and it will stick with you in your minds, dear ladies and gentlemen. And this is it. Won't European policies like CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, won't CBAM make it harder for Asia and Europe to cooperate? What are your thoughts?
Good question.
I think my views on the CBAM have been expressed several times before. Yes, it will make things harder for Indian industry, no doubt. But I would like to go one step backward to question the morality of CBAM. Because what actually is the aim? Steel industry here, I take the example of steel. Steel industry here doesn't produce green steel. Steel industry there doesn't produce green steel. Very well. But I will want my steel industry to get greener sooner. So will the other country want its steel industry get greener sooner. But I have no fund for it. Yes, the other also doesn't have the fund for it. How do I fund my industry to get greener sooner? I need imports of steel, which is not greener, but you will come at a higher cost. So I will levy a border adjustment tax on you, and that tax which I earn from it, I'll quickly pump into my industry to make them greener, and they will definitely become greener sooner. Whereas what happens in the other country is, for the very same steel that you're exporting till yesterday, from today you will be paying higher taxes, and your industry and its investment, your government and its investment for making your steel greener is going to be slower. Now, once this side of the story gets greener, they're going to say, your steel is dirty, don't come into my country. It is this kind of deplete the other. The game is for all of us, especially when it is climate game. Climate doesn't respect borders. Heat comes everywhere. Avalanches melt everywhere. Sea rise everywhere. Now, if our collective effort is to get the world greener, we have to get it everywhere. Now, within my borders, I want it to be greener, so I'll deplete you. Makes me feel, I'm sorry, in this place, sitting in Italy, sitting in Europe, for me to say this may not be in good taste. But I find it repeat of colonialism. Deplete me, but I'll be fine. And the moment I've become fine, you're no good for me, can no longer be the spirit with which international cooperation, international trade can happen. I don't want your money. I will green myself. But don't extract from me that which is required for your greening.
So you've put this case
I'm sorry
so
if it sounds black and white, but I'm sorry that's where it is.
And you've brought this moral dimension into it, which I have to say personally I had never thought.
Please tell me.
Can I just, please, if I may, without focusing on the negatives, I would also like to mention, on the other hand, initiatives like just energy transition partnerships, where there's a contribution of countries in order really to help very significant process of decarbonization, and we have the experience, for example, of Indonesia that I think was mentioned in some of the previous seminars, where the challenges are huge, and you really see the need of having a collaborative effort of several stakeholders, countries, MDBs, international partners, in order, but you can proceed towards a more cooperative way of looking at those. Another example is in Vietnam. Italy is also involved in financing part of these two. So there are also examples where you see a different dynamic.
Okay, and the question I was going to put was simply, is it possible to have a free trade then with the EU or with the UK, given that you have such strong feelings on this?
Oh, no, strong feeling is only clearly to put the facts between the two teams. The negotiation should happen in that spirit. You still need something to be done for greening. All of us need that. So that need not be a deal breaker. You need to talk and calibrate your position, just as we need to calibrate our position on some other things. Negotiation is about the art of making it possible.
The give and the take.
Yes, you need to have everything done with a sense of making it possible to achieve. Negotiation is not for breaking, but when there are fixed positions, someone will have to relax, bring in the elasticity there. Just as on something else, somebody else will have to do. So it's not as if the world has never negotiated for one another, for each other, but it cannot be so violative of the acceptable principles of free trade. Free trade is not to deplete, what do they say, kill your neighbor and you survive, or beggar thy neighbor be, and then you survive. We don't want that. After all, the principle of free trade is on efficiencies. Whoever is more efficient will better perform, but your efficiency cannot kill me. Your desperation for efficiency cannot make others, suffer. We've seen all that historically. So I would think, despite this very emotional position that I would take, I would want the free trade agreement to be signed.
And that is great to hear. So a very strongly held position there, but also a signal of flexibility and cooperation, because after all, that is what we are here about, to create deeper connections and cooperation across the region and across the world. So thank you very much for clarifying that. Our discussion has almost come to an end. So I'm going to put one last question, if I may, that's on my mind, really, which hasn't come in for you, to President Kanda, if I can. President Kanda, I heard you saying yesterday, and we all heard you saying in that wonderful address that you gave in the opening session, uncertainty is not a reason for retreat. And I wanted to clap loud. Yes, uncertainty is not a reason for retreat. So given that we are living in such uncertain times, our discussion has touched on many of them, have you heard anything in our discussion? Any key points that give you hope for a more resilient future for the region?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a really challenging time, but human history, if you look at it, our ancestors have conquered these challenges and becoming stronger and more resilient and more fair society we are now inherited, and we've got to continue this evolution. We can't go back, and hope is, for instance, I really appreciate this opportunity of discussion, the very candid dialogue amongst the distinguished colleagues, and, after all, listening carefully to each other, and, after all, as you rightly mentioned, the collaboration will pave the way and navigate these difficult times. And I'm quite confident that we can build a brighter future for the next generation.
Thank you very much, President Kanda. Let's put our hands together to say thank you to all our eminent panelists. It's been a great discussion which really underscores the importance of listening to each other respectfully and working together. Thank you. Shall we have a photograph?